Hello, leaders, and welcome to Leadership Excellence. My name is Danny Langloss. Today, we're joined by Lisa Martin. Lisa is joining us from Vancouver, Canada. It's amazing what we can do now with Zoom and all the technology out there. She's the founder of the Coach Like Leader, and she's also the best-selling author of Briefcase Mom. And what I love about this book and what I learned from Lisa as we talked is, you know, undeniably, women, female leaders, female who are in careers, women who are in careers have so much more to overcome, so many more challenges. And this book breaks down how to balance that, be successful in both, and I think relieve some of the stress that comes with that. And I'll let her talk about that here in just a second. But today we're going to take a deep dive into leaders as coaches. If you follow anything that I'm doing, I think great leaders are great multipliers. And I've been trying to learn more and more about this idea of being coach-like, the ability to ask great questions, be a better listener, and how we develop people in that way and the impact it has on organizations. So we're going to learn all about that today from Lisa. But Lisa, thank you so much for joining us today.
Danny, I'm excited to be here and look forward to our conversation.
So Lisa, can you talk to me about your inspiration for Briefcase Mom?
Well, my inspiration for Briefcase Moms came from the fact that I became one. I became a mom, and I had a pretty intense career, and I was trying to figure out, how do I do it? Like, how do I stay engaged in my career, and be a great mom? And for anyone who's gone through that transition, it is a bit of an identity crisis, because your priorities change, from a priority of being very all about career to being about children and career. So what I did was I was coaching a lot of people one-on-one at the time. And so I started coaching a lot of working moms who were struggling with the same issues as I was, and started to document that. And that turned into a book all about how to do that. And that book really, the underpinning of that book was all about coaching and using coaching techniques to support women to excel in those areas. And what organizations were very interested in this, and I ran programs in organizations around this, is retaining their working moms, because there's a real drop-off, attrition, turnover point when women are trying to manage a career and a family at the same time. So yeah, so it was a very enjoyable time working with lots of women, thousands of women, on this topic.
Such a purposeful and impactful book. I loved hearing about that. And it's funny, and through COVID and the migration and the amount of women that were leaving the workforce, and it's so damaging to companies, because all the research shows that if at least half of your leadership team are female, your company outperforms teams where that's not the case. And you can have more females on a leadership team than the 50%. But when you get to less, there's a big impact there. So helping women navigate and balance that is a big deal. So Lisa, I want to talk to you about when was the light bulb moment for you in your leadership journey where you realized that becoming a coach or more coach-like completely changed the game?
Well, that happened when I was leading an organization. So I was a partner in a national consulting firm, and I happened to be, at the time, the youngest and only partner, and sat on the board. And I had P&L responsibilities for my Vancouver office, and then I also had P&L responsibilities for a national division that we ran. So to say that I had a lot of pressure and a lot on the go is an understatement. So at the time, I was the kind of leader that saw myself as an expert in my field, and I spent most of my time telling my team what to do and how to do it, and hope and sometimes worry that they would be successful. And what I began to notice is that my team started to disengage. They stopped really putting themselves forward in team meetings. And I started to feel like I needed to take over everything. right? I began to do more micromanagement, deadlines weren't being met, and it started to become this vicious cycle downward. And I started to burn out, and I said, something has to change. What can I do better or differently here? And that's when I started to learn about coaching, leadership coaching, executive coaching. And as I began to learn more about it, I started to change my leadership style. Instead of being the kind of leader that told people what to do, I started to ask questions. Instead of being the kind of leader that didn't listen, was moving too fast, I slowed down and listened mindfully to people. And I started to see some changes happen, Danny. I started to see that my team felt more empowered and they had more autonomy because I was getting out of their way and letting them do the work that they could do. And as a result, we got better results. And then, I was hooked. This really works. And it makes a huge difference in not only how I was feeling and reducing my feelings of stress and burnout, but my team was happier. And from there, I just really got into coaching.
That's a powerful shift, right? Because what I heard you talk about a little earlier in your leadership journey was kind of created a dependency culture. And I know I've done that in my leadership journey where everybody becomes dependent on you.
100%.
And we think that when I was having a conversation with a good friend of mine the other day, runs a huge engineering firm, and he said that he thought when people came to him and he solved their problem, that he taught them how to solve that problem. But all he actually taught them how to do was come to him to get the answers for every challenge they faced. So what are some of the key differences from traditional leadership
Mm,
to coach-like leadership?
mm. That's a great question. And the key difference, well, let me back up before I even answer that. The way that I was trained as a young leader was similar to the story you just said about your friend. It was all about command and control, right? I was trained to tell people what to do. That it was my role to have all the answers, to know everything, and to be able to present myself in that way as a leader, so that I would be seen as credible, taken seriously. And I think that's where a lot of traditional management styles come from, because it was a way in which we viewed leadership, right? You needed to be that strong person that held the vision, that knew how to do everything, and was able to impart that successfully to your team. And that type of leadership style, or more traditional type of style, also led to more micromanagement. And that was what I really suffered from as a young leader, is that I felt that I knew how to do it, and I knew how to do it the right way. And so I would tell you how to do that. And so to me, that's more of that traditional style of leadership. The more modern style of leadership, and the way we need to lead today, and due to the research and also what we know, millennials and particularly Gen Z, how they will thrive in the workplace, is by having more autonomy and being more empowered. And so that's where coach-like leadership comes in, because the tenets of coach-like leadership are really around this idea that the answers to challenges lie within the individual that is experiencing them, not the leader themselves. And your role when you're a coach-like leader is to help enhance the self-awareness of the coachee or employee, and support them and guide them to coming to their own solutions. And that's how people really learn and grow. And that's what employees today really want in the workplace, because when you allow that, then they feel heard, they feel valued and respected.
You hit on a frustration I hear from a lot of leaders that we're working with. This whole idea of the millennials and Gen Z, and
Mm-hmm.
leaders wanting them as their employees to adapt to their style,
Mm-hmm.
instead of the leader shifting and adapting to the environment around them.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny as you talk about traditional versus coach like. I think we're kind of set up to fail in a lot of organizations when we make the transition to leadership. Because before being promoted, we were always the person that knew how to solve the problem. A lot
Yeah.
of times we were the best at whatever it is that we were doing.
Yeah.
And so we were rewarded and promoted into a position for doing all of the things that are actually today really viewed as negative leadership
Hmm.
behaviors. They're
Hmm.
completely the opposite of coach like. You know,
Yes.
Simon Sinek says that instead of being responsible for doing the job, we're responsible for the people doing the job.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to hear this shift and to hear you talk about the importance of this with millennials and Gen Z.
Yeah. Yeah. There's so much research out there to support that. And I'm also a parent of a Gen Z or Z, and they do not want to hear, well, back in the day, I did it this way. That is one of the worst things that you can say as a leader to a team with those generations in it. They're not interested in that, right? They're interested in what are we doing today and how can I do it, right? And the interesting thing I find in when we go into organizations to support leaders to become more coach-like with our program, we usually see there's two archetypes, and this is just following up on what you've just been saying, two archetypes of leaders that we work with. One is that more senior leader that has been trained, as you and I have just been talking about, and they're really cemented in that traditional leadership style. The other is, as you were pointing out, is the newer leader that has just been promoted into a people leading position, but hasn't had any training. So they really don't know what to do, right? And they might fall back on their expertise and what they know because that's what they know. But that's not what you need to be successful. That skill set that brings you to be promoted to be a people leader is not the skill set that you need to be successful as a people leader.
What are some of the essential skills we need to build and develop to be a successful coach like leader?
Hmm. Yeah, that's a fantastic question. So let me first define what a coach-like leader is, and from my perspective. So a coach-like leader brings the spirit of coaching to their own personal leadership style. So it's not about changing who you are. It's about integrating the spirit of coaching into your leadership style. And leaders with fundamental coaching skills can inspire, they can connect with, and bring out the best in their teams and employees. So here's the thing, coach-like leaders don't just tell their employees what to do. They use a combination of deep curiosity and empathy to guide their teams on a path to finding the answers within themselves. And coach-like leaders don't lock themselves in their offices and redo all the work themselves like I used to do, which caused my burnout. They hold people capable. So this is really important. They hold people capable and empower them to reach new heights in their careers, produce results, and really be a champion of a company culture. So if there's 5 key signs of a coach-like leader: 1, you listen more than you speak. 2, you're curious and empathetic. 3, you ask versus tell. 4, you ensure that others feel heard, valued, and respected. And 5, you hold people capable. So that's what being a coach-like leader is all about, Danny.
So this shift that
Yeah.
as I listen to you from holding people accountable to
Mm.
holding people capable. What does
Mhm.
holding people capable look like?
Yeah, it's interesting. I have a whole webinar I do on this actual topic. So the difference is holding people capable means that you first believe in them. You believe in their ability. You believe in their creativity. You believe that they have a way inside themselves that they can problem solve. So you hold them capable. So the best way I can connect that for you is to say, holding people capable equals you believe, right? You believe in them. So did you ever see that show Ted Lasso?
Oh yeah, I love Ted
Okay,
Lasso.
so Ted Lasso, remember in the locker room, he had the big sign up there, believe?
Mhm.
A big part of why Ted Lasso was successful as a coach in that particular program is because he believed in his team, remember? And he had each individual be able to believe in themselves more and more. And the more they believed in themselves, the better they performed. So the other part of that equation, so we hold people capable first. It doesn't mean we throw accountability out the door, Dan. It just means instead of holding people accountable first, we hold them capable first. And then we set in the structure to hold them accountable. But if you just hold people accountable first, you haven't got that belief system set up internally for them. And the more you believe in them, the more they believe in themselves, and then the more they believe in you as a leader. So it's a great and beautiful circle.
It is a great and beautiful circle. I love Ted Lasso. There's so many leadership lessons to be taken from that. You know, one of the 3 powerful trust accelerators that we talk about is believing in others. Believing in another person is one of the greatest gifts we can ever give them.
100%.
And this idea of holding people capable being founded in believing in other people, man, what a powerful mindset shift.
Yeah.
So it's a lot easier for most people to share what's on their mind, to share their experience,
Sure it
than
is.
to get comfortable with asking questions
Yes.
and knowing what questions to ask. What
Yeah.
is, as a leader who's trying to make that shift, what are some things that they can do? What's some advice or guidance that you can give?
So let's talk about advice right there. So I am going to share with you some techniques you can use. And one of them as a leader is not to give advice. Okay, because advice is often for the benefit of the sender. So let me explain. When we are as leaders, our intention is good when we give advice. Our intention is that we're being helpful and that we are supporting others. But for the person on the receiving end, a lot of times unsolicited advice is not really wanted and can often feel like a form of criticism to others. Yeah. So what we want to do when we're being more coach-like is to refrain from giving unsolicited advice, because people don't necessarily want to hear your stories about what you did, when, and how, unless they're specifically asking you for that. And even when they ask you for that, when you're more coach-like, you're armed with some questions to really help verify what's the purpose of that, right? So there's a really important distinction to make between mentoring and coaching. And this is something when we run our program that when we first start teaching people about being more coach-like, is to really understand what is the definition of coaching and how is it different from teaching and mentoring and helping. So the key differential is that when you're a mentor, your role is to advise, right? You're teaching people something about you that you learned on your path that you think will be helpful to them. That's not coaching. Coaching is meeting people where they are and guiding them to their own answers, right? So as a leader, you want to be very intentional about when you use mentoring and when you use coaching, and not to confuse them. And what we see a lot is that there is a overlap of the usage of that in leaders' minds. And you will not get the same results with a mentoring conversation as you will with a coaching conversation. They're used for different things.
Why is that? What's the neuroscience or the psychology
Yeah, so the
behind that?
neuroscience of that is that in your lizard brain, as Seth Godin says, or your amygdala, is when someone starts advising, it feels threatening to you. It feels like you've done something wrong, particularly if you haven't asked for it, right? So I'm talking specifically about unsolicited advice. And as I mentioned earlier, the research in particular around Gen Z is they do not want to hear the stories of back in my day, I did it this way. They just don't, right? They're not interested in that. So coming back to questions. So the first thing was don't give unsolicited advice when you're coaching. The second part of the question you asked was, how do I ask good questions. So the way we like to think about this is we call them powerful questions. And powerful questions are questions that are thought-provoking, that will cause the coachee to pause for a minute and think about what their answer might be. Because then they're going in and they're trying to tap from their own self and their own self-awareness. And I'm sure, Danny, you could probably think of a time when someone asked you a powerful question that caused you to stop in your tracks. Can you think of any of that happening to you at any time?
I've had so many great leaders and leaders that ask questions. I'm trying to think of a time. My good friend Dave Schreiner uses appreciative inquiry a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And that future focused line of questioning. And imagine yourself a year from now in your speaking and coaching business. What does that look like? What are
Good
you
question.
doing?
Yeah.
How does that feel? What
Yeah.
did it take to get there?
Yeah.
And when you ask people questions like that and use appreciative inquiry, you talk about pause and thinking. That isn't something you can just spit an answer out to, right?
No, that's right. And so what I noticed you say there, and this is the tenets of a powerful question, is those examples that you just gave were all what and how questions. What and how questions. And they're important because, and also they were open-ended, right? So they were what, how questions that were open-ended, which make them powerful. What is not a powerful question is using a how and a what that is closed-ended. How was your day? Well, you're going to get good or bad, right? So you want to ask powerful questions that open a person's mind up to thinking around the possibilities and to be able to tap into their own solutions. The other thing, the question that we want to avoid when we're asking powerful questions are questions that start with the word why.
Yes.
Right? Because when we ask a why question, that again sets off the amygdala because it feels threatening, and what we'll see is when we ask why questions, people will often respond with rationales or excuses for their behavior. So, for example, if you were to ask somebody, "What is the reason that you were late for the past 2 meetings?" versus "Why are you late for meetings?" And even if you ask it in the same tone, you're going to get a very different response. So that's one of the really important things that we teach in the Coach Like Leader program is how to ask powerful questions, because you might inadvertently, one of the biggest things people take away from that is, wow, I ask a lot of why questions. And of course you may, because some of us, depending on our field, have been trained in the 5 whys, like the way that you make inquiry, but that's not the kind of questioning that you want to use when you're having a coaching conversation.
The why questions really do imply that somebody has done something wrong, that there is a judgment, that there is disagreement, right?
Or disapproval.
Disapproval.
Yeah.
Excellent, excellent,
Yeah.
excellent, excellent.
Yeah.
I love how you broke down some of the key components of how to ask powerful questions, how to go deeper than the surface level. And earlier you said something just about the mindset of curiosity, right? Like we're asking to understand, we're asking from a place of empathy to gain perspective of another person. We're not asking because we disagree or we're waiting to judge. And then the ability to listen to understand versus listen to respond
Huge.
really changes everything.
It changes everything. So it's all about intent, isn't it? What's the intent that I have when I go into a coaching conversation with someone? And we teach that it's so important, as you said, the mindset, right? To have a coaching mindset. So what does that mean? Well, that means that you come at coaching with a coach approach, which says, I'm empathetic and curious when I speak to people. Like, I actually care. I really care, Danny, about what you think and where you want to go and how I can support you to get there. Not do it for you, but as a leader, how I can support you to get there. And that goes a long way in building relationships and trust, right? And if we want to be successful with our teams, we have to build that. And if you don't come at it from that perspective with that coaching mindset, I think you're going to have trouble being successful and being coach-like, because you can learn all these techniques that you and I are talking about powerful questions and mindful listening and the coaching formula and all those things. But when we teach in the program, we have 3 stages that we take people through, and it's key to the acronym ACE: approach, coaching formula, everyday coaching. Because our role, what I'm trying to do, is have people be everyday coaches. So when you become coach-like, you do this every day as a leader, not once a year in a performance review or not once a quarter in a performance discussion. You do it every day. And so the A in ACE stands for approach. And that's exactly what you and I've just been talking about, coming at this with a mindset that is using curiosity and empathy, and showing care for the people that you lead.
So some people hear the word empathy, and they think about it in its rawest form.
Yes.
That somebody is struggling and you climb down into the hole and sit with them, right? Brene Brown's talks about that's empathy. Compassion is the action of reaching down into the hole and help pull them out. But when you think about deeper meaning of empathy and empathetic leadership, what does that mean to you, and why is that so powerful, and why is it so important to be a coach-like leader?
Because I think that, and I think this is where you and I, first started connecting, was about how we both feel about the importance of empathy. And, there is the difference, as you're saying, between sympathy, empathy, and compassion. And empathy, from my perspective, for coach-like leadership is the ability to really understand someone, to be with them, and to share and hear what they're feeling, right? And then to be able to support them with what it is that they need to do, right? So if they're feeling frustrated, or they're feeling sad, or they're feeling elated, or whatever that may be, is to sit with them long enough and listen and ask the right questions to understand where they're coming from, is the best way that I can describe it, so that then you, as the leader, can support them through whatever that next hurdle may be for them. Or maybe it's not even a hurdle, maybe it's like a trajectory upwards, right? There's not actually a hurdle, it's to keep moving forward. And that's the whole part about coach-like leadership. It's all about, from my perspective, it's all about the action, the taking of the action, and moving the coachee forward. It's not about it's not about status quo and staying in the same place, because we're always wanting to move, right? So it's not, when I talk about coaching and the coaching formula, so the way we describe coaching and the coaching formula is, coaching is a combination of powerful questions and mindful listening that lead to results. So there has to be all 3 of those parts of the equation for you to have had a successful coaching conversation. If you have powerful question and mindful listening and no results, you've had a lovely conversation, Danny, like you and I are having, because we're asking you're asking powerful questions, you're listening mindfully, we're having a great conversation. I wouldn't say it's a coaching conversation, right? Because we're not leading to an end result. So the end result, a result, is taking an action or a plan that will move the coachee forward.
Oh, I'm going to be taking action. I'm going to be developing a plan to be better at my ability to coach and connect, and to make sure I'm doing that every single day.
That's fair. But I'm not asking you a lot of questions right now.
I know. No, yeah. I'm the mentee. I'm the coachee. The interesting thing you said, I think, is really powerful, is this idea of empathy allows us to meet people where they're at.
100%.
And the job of coaching isn't for us to take somebody from where they are to where we want them to be. It's for us to take them from where they are to where they want to be, through asking powerful questions, listening mindfully, and them being able to identify actions they can take. Because when they come to this, and when they embrace it, and when they have that aha moment, and when they're proud of themselves for getting there, they
Mm.
can own that and it becomes part of them, and they're able to make it their own because they were able to formulate a way to get there.
Yes, 100%. That's, and
And
it's, yeah,
that is the
that's the
power. That's
magic.
why great leaders are great coaches.
Yes,
Great
that's the
leaders are
magic.
great multipliers. And
Yeah.
what do you say to a leader who's like, Danny, Lisa, I love this. I agree, but I'm so busy. And if
Yeah.
I took the time to do this, and instead of just giving the answer and letting people keep going on, I'd never get anything done. What do you say to that?
Mm. Well, I'd probably ask a few questions around that, but the first one would be, well, what do you think will be different for you if you don't make a change?
Hmm. I love it.
Mhm. And we would go from, there. There would probably be a series of questions I would ask, but that would be where we would start, because you want the leader to understand that if nothing changes, nothing changes. And if they want things, you have to ascertain, do they actually want things to be different?
Yeah.
And if they don't, then they're going to stay status quo. If they do, then we can work towards supporting them to, as you said, identify the actions that they want to take. And that's part of the power of coaching when you were talking about that. And there's the brain science behind that too, because when people take actions on their own accord, aligned with what's important to them, they get a little bit of dopamine, and so your brain says, I'm happy with this, I like this. And so that's part of that aha moment that you were talking about. And when we have those kinds of insights, those are the precursor to behavior change, right? If we're going to get in a bit nerdy about this, right? So
Yeah.
when you help the coachee have that insight and some self-sufficiency, they drop the dopamine, then they're like, oh, well, this will then spur me to action. So it's the insights that, spur the action, the dopamine, and then the action to creating new habits, right? Because those actions, then that small behavior change, is then the foundation of a new habit. And so what we're trying to do in the Coach Like Leader is understanding and using all of that to help these leaders create new habits, sustaining habits around being coach like every day. Yeah. So what we're teaching, we're actually doing with our
Well,
students at the same time, if that makes sense.
and in addition to the dopamine, I got to believe there's a strong hit of oxytocin, the bonding chemical,
Yeah.
because you feel seen,
Mm-hmm.
heard,
Mm-hmm.
valued. You feel
Mm-hmm.
it's serotonin, right? The
Yeah.
significance chemical is
Yeah.
being released. And so to me, I think it's cool, and we'll nerd out for a second,
Yeah.
that there is science
Oh
behind
yeah.
why this is the new age of leadership and how it works and why it works and why it is effective.
Yes.
It is. And one of the things we talk to leaders about, Lisa, is think about how many times you're interrupted. Think about how many times you're in flow and you are interrupted.
Mm.
And while a coaching conversation might take 15 or 20 minutes, it's an investment. And
Mm-hmm.
because when somebody comes in and you have a coaching conversation, think about it in a pizza, right? Like they're
Mm-hmm.
trying to figure out the pepperoni. When
Mm-hmm.
when you have a coaching conversation, you don't help them just figure out the pepperoni, you help them figure out the slice. And before you've known
Mm.
it, they
Mm.
can take care of the whole pie, and
Mm.
they're not coming to you time and time again, and the constant interruptions. You become a
Mm.
multiplier, and now people are
Mm.
acting independently on their own.
Mm.
They're empowered, they're
Mm-hmm.
ignited, they're innovative, they're proactively solving these challenges
Yeah.
that never come to you. So I believe it does take more time on the front end, but it is an investment, and it's one of the most the most
Mm.
powerful investments we can make for our people and
Yep.
for ourselves as leaders.
Exactly. I couldn't say it any better than that. That was beautiful. I love the metaphor of the pizza too. I think that is great. And you hit the nail on the head, because this is a sum of, if there is any resistance about coaching, it's the time. And we see this come up every time we take a cohort, through the program. Like, oh well, I don't have time, and I haven't got time, and et
Mhm.
cetera, et cetera. And the reality is, how we talk about it is, well, if you look at it from a business perspective, before you go into implementation, one would hope you develop a strategy, right? because otherwise all those activities or tactics that you're implementing aren't going anywhere. They're not directed. So you can imagine the time that you would lose if you do that. So it's the same thing with your people. If you just take a little bit of time up front, it saves you so much time in the long run of going in the wrong direction. And that seems to hit home with, people. They're like, oh yeah, yeah. And what we're doing, and I love that you said 15 minutes, because a lot of times there's a misconception that coaching has got to be this sit down 1 hour long conversation. It doesn't. What we're teaching people how to do is be everyday coaches so that you can have those coaching conversations sometimes in 10 minutes or less, because it's all about changing how you show up every day, Danny, with your people, with an inquisitive mind, right? I like to call it being the compassionate investigative reporter, right? You're trying to get underneath things. You're trying to understand what's really happening with people. And clearly, as a leader, one of the things we want to work towards is understanding our people's intrinsic motivation, right? Because our role as leaders is to inspire to vision, right? To inspire people to action around vision. And we can't do that without understanding what intrinsically motivates my team. And the way you do that is through coach-like conversations.
100% empathy. I think empathy gives us the roadmap to people's passions, desires, fears, dislikes, motivators, what inspires them. We could go like down a whole rabbit hole there, but we got a few minutes left here.
Okay.
And we've talked about a ton of stuff that I think is actionable. I think there's mindset shifts. I think there's things people can do and practice just from our short conversation. And we'll talk about how to get in touch with you and go to your website, get some free things that are available, tools there, and look into things more. But a big part of this is active listening mindfully. So what tips or strategies do you have to help people become better listeners?
So many.
What are like the top two?
I know you do too. So I think in terms of summarizing that, is a way to look at it would be when you're having a conversation with someone, and we're talking about practicing mindful listening, where are you shining the spotlight? Are you shining the spotlight on the other person, or are you shining it on yourself, or both? And the key is, if you want to have a successful coach-like conversation and practice mindful listening, is the spotlight needs to always be on the other person. And so when I was talking before about unsolicited advice giving, that's when you put the spotlight back on you and make the conversation all about yourself.
This was worth the entire conversation, right? Because I'm constantly, like, everybody, not everybody, but 95% of the population can hear. Like 10% of the population knows how to listen, right? As human beings, we're wired to share. And those, you're not going to be able to Google and find those stats because I just made them up. But
it sounds good though.
But when you think about mindful listening, if you start with just a mindset shift of shining the light on the other person, and then you combine that with curiosity and minimal encouragers and just some of the components of active listening. Wow, that's something that we can all do today. We can enter the conversation and say, we are going to shine the light on this person, and we're going to resist the temptation of hijacking the conversation. Right?
Exactly. Exactly. You got to hold yourself back. And that is the key, right? Is if you are conscious and intentional, like you're saying, about shining the spotlight on someone else, you will notice when you are not. And you will fall out of it, but that's okay. That's part of the learning process. Just bring it back, because we're going to be times where we're shining it, and we shine it over there, right? But then we got to just bring it back. So as you're growing and developing and learning, is be compassionate with yourself, because you will not do this 100% of the time, but you can begin. You can begin.
Practice. Got to create new habits.
Exactly, 100%.
It's so hard because so much of leadership is abnormal human behavior.
Mhm.
It really is. And that's why everything we talk about, everything I know I share, I tell people this is aspirational. There's no
Mhm.
way I could show up 100% of the time and do this and execute 100% of the time. I'm just a human being. And the
Right.
more we give ourselves grace in that, and the
Mhm.
more we're mindful, we're intentional
Mhm.
about these things, and the more we practice, the better it will become. And the good news is if you mess up on your journey,
Mhm.
that's okay.
It's totally okay.
It's
It's
okay.
it's it's totally okay. It's better to be in progress than to worry about perfection, and you just need to start with coach like leadership. And I can tell you that when you practice just some of the things that you and I have talked about today, you will start to see a difference in A, how you show up, and B, how people respond to you and how people connect with you and how you build those trusting relationships, which as a leader, those are what you need to get results. And at the end of the day, you are measured on your results, right? The results that you get through others. And so if you were really serious about being excellent in that, I believe that if you integrate these coach like skills into your day to day leadership, you'll see a difference there. You'll just be, you'll be less stressed as a leader and your teams will be happier. And who doesn't want that?
Who doesn't want that? That kind of like jumped my last question about what is the ROI on being
Mm,
a coach like leader. So, in addition to what you just shared, what are some other organizational impacts that we see
mm.
from being a coach like leader?
Yeah, there's tons of research out there to support this, Danny. But what we see is we see an improvement in communication skills and communication between leaders and teams and amongst teams themselves. We see improved engagement. So you'll be much more engaged. And this is obvious when you feel heard, valued, and respected. The outcome is you're much more engaged, right? We see that this helps with retention because we know the equation with engagement and retention. So the more engaged you are, the more likely you're to retain, and the less likely you're going to have quiet quitting. So you'll see a reduction in quiet quitting as well. So those are just some of the things. And there's research also to suggest that you'll see an improvement in financial results when you have more coach-like leaders and a more coach-like culture. And in fact, I think the stat was a 21%. This was a study that was done, a 21% increase in business results. So there's some solid numbers out there to show that this works. It's not just, an airy fairy nice, thing to have. It is
There,
actually a need to have.
there are tangible results that we are all searching for within our companies and organizations from being a coach like leader. We're talking with Lisa Martin, the founder of the Coach Like Leader, the best selling author of Briefcase Moms, which again I think is just fantastic. The women in our organizations, especially the female leaders and the increased responsibility, face so many more challenges because of their roles at home as a mom. So I encourage people to go out and read that. And I encourage male leaders to get a deeper understanding of that and to help become champions of that. Because oftentimes one of the issues I see in our female leaders, they don't give themselves grace. They don't treat themselves with compassion. They stack this up. And I think we can help take that off, both the male and female leaders within organizations. Lisa, do you have a call to action for our listeners as we walk out of here today?
Yes. If this has piqued your curiosity at all about becoming more coach-like as a leader, you can head to my website, which is coachlikeleader.com. And we have a Coach-like Leader starter kit that people can grab, and that'll get them on their way to their coach-like journey.
Awesome. 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 That will be linked in the podcast description along with Lisa's LinkedIn profile. If you're not following her on LinkedIn, that's where we first connected. And I
That's
just
right.
absolutely fell in love with her philosophy on leadership, her thoughts on leadership, her actionable strategies on leadership. I love reading and engaging in her content. There's so many takeaways today, but when you talked about mentoring versus coaching, you said meet people where they're at and guide them to their own answers.
Mm-hmm.
Truly the essence of coaching. When we look at critical skills and competencies to be coach like, resist the temptation to give advice. Do not give advice. In our brains, it's taken as a form of criticism. So many times people come and they just want somebody to listen. They want
Mhm.
somebody to that they just want to feel heard.
Mhm.
They just want to feel acknowledged there. To ask powerful questions, thought-provoking questions that create people, cause people to stop and pause and think. Open-ended questions, avoiding why questions, again, because they're taken as being a criticism. Approach this: listen versus talk, be curious versus judgmental, ask versus tell. It just and hold people capable.
Mm.
What a shift to believe instead of this hold accountable, hold capable, meaning believe in them. Lisa, thank you so much for joining us. So much gold in this episode. I can't wait to go back and dissect it and just think about all the areas that I can just try to add layers of greatness to what it is that we're doing.
Well, thanks for having me, Danny. And thank you for spreading the word about how important this is. And the more leaders that we can get to practice being coach like every day, the better our workplaces are going to be.
Great leaders are great coaches, because great coaches are great multipliers, the types of environments they create. To our listeners, if you enjoyed this episode, please hit the subscribe button so you never miss another episode. Consider giving us a rating review so we can reach more people. And remember to always be committed to excellence.